Hi. So in this video, some of you had asked to see how to make some graphs. This video is purely a how-to on how to work with some data and how to make some graphs. I pulled a data set that from work. So this is a live data set. I pulled out all the patient information. Um, but I thought we could look at some data and how I would use it in process improvement, and we could start making some graphs. And then I will share this data set with you. I will tell you that the surgeon names in here are randomized. They're not. They are surgeons we work with, but they are not. The outcomes of this are not indicative of the surgeons' names that are on here. So, just so you know, there's no HIPAA concerns. I just needed to pull a data set. So what I have right here, this is how I would look at first case on time starts. So what I've got is name of a surgeon, the procedure they did, the date of the surgery, the start time of the surgery, and I only pulled first cases. So you're only going to see 7:30s and 9s. On Thursdays, we have a delayed start, and so we start at 9 o'clock. A delay reason if documented, and so as we kind of scroll through here, you'll start seeing some documentation reasons in here. And then to the right is the time that it actually went into the room. So I will preface this by saying everybody has their own ways of doing things in Excel. There's some tricks that people pick up, different ways of doing things. So I'm sure not everything I do here will be the most effective way. And if you have a way to do this that's faster, please feel free to use it. I'm just going to show you how I would do it. So the first thing I would do when I'm looking at this is I want to know if there was a delay at all. So the first thing I'm going to do is mark a delay time column, and I'm going to subtract the time in the room from the time out of the room. Now, I want you to see what that looks like. So it looks like this crazy this crazy number. Because we're subtracting time, we have to adjust the fact that we're looking at time values. So I'm going to take this, multiply it by 24 hours in the day, and multiply it by 60 minutes in an hour to get to the minutes. So this is saying they went in 18 minutes early, so negative 18. So by looking at the times, they went in the room at 8:42. They were scheduled at 9. They did go in 18 minutes early. So I'm just going to do that for everything in here. So Excel tips, you can drag. The other thing is this little guy here, if you just double click, it'll go all the way down. So if you have like a big data set, you don't have to like sit and scroll, you just double click. So, all right, cool. So now I know the delay time. The other thing I'm going to want to know is what day of the week. That might be something that's interesting to me. I can tell you just by looking here, these are all 2020 dates. Oh, no, they're not. Some of them are 2019. Okay, so we're going to pull a year in as well. So I'm going to create 3 columns. I'm going to give myself a day of week, a year, and a month column. So day of week, month, year, because it might help me later on. So this formula, it's a text formula, will convert a date to either a day of week, a month, or a year. So I'm going to take, this is the day of week, so it's equals text. You're going to grab the cell that you want. And then for this, it's day of week. So I'm going to say day, 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 day. And it's going to tell me it's Thursday. For the month, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to, oops, today's is, but I'm going to say month, 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 month. And then for the year, I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to say, you can guess it, year, 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 year. Something neat with these formulas, depending on how you want it to come back, if I put 3 Ds instead of 4, it's going to give you the truncated name. I can do the same thing for month, and if I just put 2 Ys, it'll give me just 20 or 19. But for this one, just for the fun, we're going to give it the whole time. So for this, I want all these to go all the way down, so I'm just going to highlight across. Now I have my dates. Something you may have noticed is that this column, it's not recognizing this is a date. So if I click on this, see how it says general up here? a quick way to fix that, if you have data in Excel that's not being recognized in the proper format, so if it's a date and it's reading it as a general or as a text field, if you highlight that and go to data and then click text to columns, you're not going to do anything other than hit finish. It will now kind of reset anything that's in the background of your data. And now if we go back to home, you're going to see these are being read as dates. That matters if you're going to run pivot tables against this, because whether it reads it as a date or not will depend whether your pivot tables, how your pivot tables nest, how they work. So now I have data that I can work with. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually run a pivot table. So I know this is quick. I'm kind of assuming you guys have some base level Excel knowledge. I am going to give you this file, and again, you can pause as we go. So if anybody needs something more simplistic, please just email me and we can do some fundamentals. But for this one, I'm going to assume base level information in kind of data analysis. So to run your pivot table, you're going to put your cursor in A1. It's under Insert Pivot Tables, and it's going to just grab all my data. So I'm going to trust that it's grabbing the entire range. I'm going to let it go to a new worksheet and hit OK. So I'm going to just move my face over here for a minute. So now I have my pivot table. So my pivot table is giving me all of the columns that I had here on sheet 1, and I'm just going to name these. So I'm going to call this data. I'm going to call this pivot. But everything you see in here, primary surgeon, primary procedure, case start date, is exactly what you're seeing across the top, primary procedure, primary surgeon, primary procedure, case start date. So the first thing I'm going to want to know is, let's say I want to know by month and by year. So I'm going to nest these. So see how I put the year on top of the month? I can do it like this. I put the year over here. I can put the year under, and so that's going to, but you know, that looks a little weird. So I'm going to put the year on top of the month. The other thing here, we do have a date, so I just want to show you what that looks like. So if we put case start date, it's going to give us these drop downs. The reason that I built those other columns is like I don't always like how the pivot works with these quarters. So one of the reasons that I did it the way I did was so that we could have a little bit cleaner just year month without the quarters. So we have that. And let's see what else we want to do. Okay. I need to do one more thing in my data set. So we have some delay times here, but what I don't have is a column telling me whether something is a delay or not. So we're going to create that really quickly. You have to name it something to work in the pivot. So I'm going to call this play tracking. Name it whatever you want. I'm basically going to say early, on time, or late. So early. Now I'm not going to do the double click trick that we did before because I'm not putting this in everything. I'm only looking for negative numbers, and I have this data sorted already by in the room time. So these are all early. Everything that's a 0 was on time. Cool. So it was on time. These were late, or we could just put delayed. A little nicer than late. I'm going to grab this and fill this down to the end. All right. Cool. So now that we added a column, we need to adjust our pivot table. So under pivot table, analyze, change data source. I want to go out. So if you notice, this is only going out to column J. We're just going to change the J to a K. And hit OK. Okay, well, it doesn't like that. So we're going to just grab it manually. So now I have my delay tracking column. What I'm going to do is grab delay tracking and throw it in the values. And all this is doing right now is counting everything that's in that column, which is not really helpful because it's just giving us a total count of first cases. So I'm also going to take delay tracking and throw it in my column. So now I know by month how many were delayed, how many were early, and how many were on time. So now we're getting to a point where we can actually start to analyze this data. So when I do data analysis, I typically will have 3 tabs. I'll have my raw data, I'll have a pivot tab, and then I'm going to create a third tab that I'm going to call my report. So I'm going to grab this and paste it over here. And I'm just going to start to clean this up a little bit. So I'm going to delete these because I want them to go in order. Cool. All right. Now I have to remember what my headers are because I didn't copy that column. Delayed early and on time. And I will be honest with you, I always calculate my column. So I'm going to delete this just to make sure that there's no problems. Total first cases. And I'm going to actually write a formula for this. Because if I start changing numbers in here for whatever reason, in this data set, I don't see why I would. If I copied this as a whole number, but then made adjustments, the total won't adjust. So when I copy data from the pivot, my recommendation to you is to only grab kind of the center part of it and to actually write yourself formulas for your grand totals. So in this case, I'm just going to write a sum formula and pull it down. All right, cool. When I do tables, I like them centered. That's just a personal preference. Okay, so now we kind of know where we're sitting. So we know totals. The next thing I'll do is kind of create myself a table. I can look at some percentages. So now I want to see what's the percent of delays. I'll write all these. Yeah, I know I can do this with dollar signs. It's a pretty small table, so sometimes pointing and clicking for me is easier on these small tables. So I'm going to grab this, pull it down, change it to a percent. Let's go out a decimal place. All right, cool. So now I can see my delay rate by month is right here. Okay, so I can, if I want to graph that, if we wanted to look at this over time, so I could, now we're going to get into some charts. So I'm going to insert, and Excel's going to make you some recommendations. You can always hit recommend and kind of look at what it's giving you, see if it's helpful. So I'm going to highlight what I want, go back to recommend. So here it's a line graph. Obviously it is a suggestion, bar chart. So you can kind of get an idea. We're going to go with one of these. I'm going to start with a line graph. I'll be honest, I don't like the one it's giving me. So I'm going to go over to all charts and go to line. I like the one with the markers on it. I think it's a little easier to see where it is, especially because we're going to go in and we're going to put some labels. So this is just a personal preference, but you can kind of play with these and see which ones you like. You're really choosing between this one here and this one here when you're doing a line chart. And we're going to look at it like a line. We're going to look at it as a bar and see what you like better. So now I have this. If I'm doing a percentage graph, I will always go up to 100%. So as we looked at earlier, you know, watch your, ooh, nope, Rebecca, these are percent, so it's a 1. Okay, so on the percentage, I always like to go from 0 to 100 because I think if it's 100%, you need to kind of visually see where that is in the middle. I don't like what's called trailing zeros. So if I'm not showing a decimal point, there's no reason to have them there. So I'll go into the numbers and take it out 0 decimal places. And I'm going to write myself a title that makes sense. So I'm going to call this OR delay percentage by month. So some of the other things I like to do, I'm going to go into here and I'm going to get some data labels. So I like to put them above, and then I'll see how they fit, right? You can kind of play with them. Like, do you want them to the right? Well, that's in the middle of your line. So if we do right or left or center, it's kind of right. So you're really looking at above or below. Um, you can also do a data call out, which kind of looks like this, and we can pull that back to just a pop out box. But again, on a graph this size, I think above is fine. So I'm going to stick with above. And what else do I want to do here? I think that's good. I would do some other quick design stuff. Format chart area. I would go and put a border on it. I like black solid lines, and I like to make rounded corners. I just think they look nice. I would go in and I would change the default here to black. It defaults to gray in this version of Excel. I'm not sure why. I like a nice clean black. I also like bolded numbers. I think they pop a little better. All right. So now we're getting a graph that is helping us out a little bit. So I can tell you in May of 2020, this was the height of COVID. So our ORs were were down. Interestingly, you know, as you're watching this trend line, we were trending up and up. We got hit with COVID, and when we came back, we've been better, right? So our delays are a little bit better. You can also, if we really wanted to look into this, we can go into the axis, right? We know our lowest point is 49.2. So if we made our minimum 0.4 and we know they're not going above 8, we could go 0.8 and really zoom in and see this. So this is, it depends what you want your graph to look like. Again, if it's a percentage, I kind of like it on the 100-point scale. But if you're trying to show, really zoom in and be able to see the difference between where we were pre and post, excuse me, you can see that here a little bit better. So here is, I'm just going to undo those couple of steps and leave it like this. So there's OR delay percentages by month. So when you're tracking data, and you can have this set up and then each month you just go and put in. So let's say if we kept going with this, right? If we went out to the end of the year, you can pre-build your graph. And then as you start to get these results, you start to put them, you can have the graph populate for you. So sometimes if I'm building this out for somebody who maybe is not so Excel savvy, I'll build them a table like this, and then all they have to do is put the results in. We can also look at this like a bar chart. I'm going to make it, again, so I'm going to grab this, I'm going to insert. And this time I know I want a bar. So you have a couple options here. In this case, they're going to look exactly the same, but we'll look at some data where they might be different. So I'm going to go with this clustered column chart. I'm going to make it another color. So let's change the color on it. Let's make it orange. Same data. Pull it down here. And I'm going to do some of the same stuff, and it's just because of my that I like. I'm going to name it the same. So I'm going to grab Oops. On this graph, it made that really gigantic, so we can take that down, take it back up. You can play with your sizing. We're going to do the same thing with this axis. And I know I'm going through here quick. The more you make graphs, the more you will get familiar with all this stuff and where all the settings are. And then as soon as you're really comfortable with it, Excel will change all of where everything is, and you won't know where anything is again. You have to completely relearn it from scratch every time Excel runs an update. Okay, so now for labels on this one, I'm going to go into data labels. So center, I don't hate center on bar graphs. The only issue with it is it can start to run into each other a little bit. You can do inside end or outside end. I tend to like outside end on bar charts. You can also do these data call outs where it pops out that way, but we're gonna leave it as outside end. If you notice, they're a little big. So what I'm gonna do is just highlight the date, and then I can go up here and shrink that down just a little bit. And I think that looks a little better. So now we're just shrinking the data or just shrinking the labels here, but we're leaving everything else as is. So we've got a couple different ways to look at this information. Uh, Really personal preference on what you like better. I think in reports, I tend to go with bars a little bit more than lines. It depends how much room I have on the paper. If I was doing this one, I would probably shrink it more like that. Um, so a line chart is nice if you have like a really skinny but wide area on whatever report you're putting it in. If you need to take up some room on the page visually, this one's nice because there's just more color to it and you can make it whatever color you want. So we're going to look at a couple other stuff. So we're going to go back to our pivot and we're going to start to look at some of delay reasons. So now we know high level how good the OR is doing, but we don't really know why. So of these delays, we're going to clear out some of this a little bit. I'm going to close this for now. Go back to my pivot table. I'm going to leave my months up, but I'm going to turn off this delay tracking. I'm actually going to put it up here as a filter. And then what I'm going to do is, let me think about this. All right, I'm going to take off year and month, and I'm going to put delay reasons as my row. Yeah. And then I'm going to put delay reasons as my value. I want to go into delay tracking and I only want delayed. So what this is going to do is filter it out for me. It's just going to say I only want the delayed cases. So of cases that were delayed in that whole span of time, here's the reasons that they broke out into. We could put our year and month over here on the top. And so now we have it by month so we can see like, I don't know, what's a good one? We're going to talk about some of our, okay, so line block delay. So you can kind of see how that trends over time. Obviously, and I'm going to call it the elephant in the room because this is one of the biggest problems we have with this data is that it's either blank, right? Or it says see comments. So then when we go to do this data analysis, I don't know what any of that means. So what I'm left with is all of this other stuff. So anesthesia late, line block delay, equipment not ready. What else is a good one? Patient not ready. We have a smattering of those. So because this data is so kind of, there's no real trends to it, looking at it in the month or year isn't good. But what I like about pivot tables is you can kind of play with it a bunch of different ways. That's really quick to see how you want to graph it. So looking at this data, it's not really helpful to put the month or year on them and take those off. And you could flip it. I'll show you why I didn't do it. So I could put the delay reasons across the top and then do the year and the month like we had before. But it gets really long and kind of wide. So that's why I had it inverted this time. I tend to put the longer list down and then the shorter list across the top. So I'm just going to look at this in the aggregate for now. So we have all our reasons, and this would actually lend itself to a decent Pareto chart. The outcomes are going to be, you know what they are just by looking at it here. But for the purpose of our exercise, let's start here and make ourselves a Pareto chart. So I'm going to copy it out of the pivot, and we're going to go down here, paste my data in. I'm going to change this from this line to say blank. And I'm going to sort this. So I'm going to insert, nope, data, sort. We're going to sort by B. And we're going to sort it the other way because I did it backwards. We're going to do it largest to smallest. Okay. So now we have our data sorted largest to smallest. So what I can do now, we're going to highlight that. We're going to go back and insert. And I bet, yeah. So if we go into recommended chart, it's recommending a Pareto chart. It knows right off the bat that that's what we're going to want to look at. So in the recommendations, here it is. It's going to give us this Pareto chart. Under all charts, now I'm going to remember where it is. Clearly, I don't remember where it is. There it is. Nope. Hmm. All right. So here's our Pareto chart. If you notice, because these are so long, we're getting some dots. This is a pet peeve of mine. When you don't have enough room in your axis for your labels. So your chart either needs to be bigger or you need to have a smaller font. So sometimes what I'll do is kind of play with the font until it fits and then see if it's reasonable or not. That's probably a little too small. So then the question becomes whether we can make this bigger. Oh. All right. We're gonna go and put some labels on this. The other thing you can add is your axis title. So this one, because it is technically a combo graph, axis titles can be helpful because you can tell your user that this is count of delay reasons. And this side is showing you percentage of delays. So now you've got your Pareto chart, and we want to, the one thing that's frustrating in Excel is that it does not always want to tell you where the 80% marker is. You kind of have to, you have to know that this here is your 80% line, and go looking for it. So it doesn't like to give you an option to put the markers on the top of your Pareto line. So in this case, you know that this is 80% right here. And so adding these two together, the blank and the C comments. So in this data set, really what we need to do is get these two under control because these two reasons are so onerous. Now, just for our own edification, right? If this number was 47 and this was 249 and this was 222, so the Pareto chart is smart enough to resort your data to put these in different order. So let's make this 47 and 249. So as you mess around with your numbers, right, you can see where it goes. So we can even split these up more. Maybe this is 149 and this is 209, right? So you can kind of see in this one, if these were the way the numbers broke out, your 80% line is here, which means these are the three reasons that you would want to look at. The data set we're working with isn't this helpful, but just to see how you would use your Pareto chart. So I do like that it kind of auto sorts it. It doesn't matter if they're in these orders. So even though you have all these other reasons, that's kind of unimportant. What you really, 80% of your reasons in this made up instance are being tied to line, block, delay, surgeon late, and patient not ready. So how do you take your efforts and really apply them over here? So I think what I wanted to get through is when you're looking at data, you're going to have a raw data set. You need to get it into a table format so that you can graph it. So these are just a couple of examples of different ways to graph things. I will mention some of the things that are in the book. The Office suite is really not the best place to be doing that kind of work. So when we talk about things, I apologize, I'm on call this weekend. When we talk about things that like regular flowcharts and fishbone diagrams and causal loops. The Office suite really does not give us a great way to utilize those. What I would recommend, I'm going to pull it over here. There is there is a company called Lucidchart. So Lucidchart, it does have a free option. You can get you can make 3 flowcharts for free with their free version that you just have to sign up for. Lucidchart gives you some really great, this is just my basic, so you can see all these premium ones you'd have to pay for. However, I could go into this one and use this flowchart as a template based on my free trial. So this gives us, Lucidchart gives you a lot of ability to make flowcharts. It's flowcharting software. Actually, if we go in here and type Fishbone, it has some free fishbone diagrams that you could even start with over here. So if you're starting to just dabble with this, or if you just need it 1 or 2 times, Lucidchart has some great stuff. Because I'll be honest with you, trying to do this in Excel or trying to do this in Word is going to drive you bananas. Trying to make all the little boxes line up. So if you really want to put a fishbone diagram, or if you really want to put a basic flow chart, I would recommend signing up for the Lucidchart free trial and using this instead. It's really easy to learn, and it'll honestly take you less time to learn this than it will to make Word work with you. If you're trying to build out a flow chart or a fishbone diagram. Causal loops, I don't see too many of those in practice, and everything else I think is um, pretty pretty basic in terms of building things like decision matrix. You can put that in Excel. The other one that's in here, I believe, is a force field diagram. Yeah, so these are both premium ones, but they're pretty easy to replicate, even if you just start a blank diagram and build one from scratch. So you can see where in here you could pretty easily build yourself a force field analysis, which is also in this chapter, without having to jump through all the hoops. There's some stuff in PowerPoint or Word. I like it in PowerPoint if I'm using this type of stuff. So we're just going to open a blank presentation. So under Smart Art, it's under Insert. There's a lot of process stuff in here as well. So sometimes you can use what's here. It's not full flow charts. I mean, it's made for presentations, obviously, but sometimes you can get what you need in here. So if it's a short process, you can certainly use this. This one, I've used this one before, where you can have like your major processes and the sub bullets. I think I may have even used some in slides for class. So there is some stuff in here. It's not as formal. I have definitely used this cycle matrix for plan, do, check, act stuff. So if you're designing a plan, do, check, act, there's a really nice cycle matrix is what it's called in PowerPoint that you can use, that gives you this nice outline, and you can just like plan, do, check, act. You can put your format in here. So those are pretty nice. If you're doing a really simple org chart, or if you're just building an org chart for your project, the project leader, and this is how it's going to organize, the hierarchy graphs in here aren't bad, but it tends to be too much if you're trying to do like an entire organization. I don't know that I would try to do that. This one, right, a stacked Venn, I think we've used that before. Or if you're looking for a basic Venn diagram, those are pretty easy. Here's some of the other matrix ones that are great if you're using that, if you're doing that plan, do, check, act. Any of these are fine. They're perfect. The pyramid ones I've used before. Whenever I see this, I think of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that sort of pyramid. But these are great too, and you can build them from scratch. So designing and graphics, there's a lot of options for you here. So you don't always have to use Word. You don't always have to use Excel. Sometimes you're going to be using a combination. There is software from Office, and I am blanking on what it's called, that makes flowcharts. I have it at work and I use it a lot. but it's with the increased the Office package. So you'd have to, if you have access to flowchart software through Office, that's also great, and I use it all the time. Visio, it's called Visio, is the Microsoft flowchart software. So Visio is also great. It does what Lucidchart does, but there's no free version of it. So if you have access to Visio, great software for making flowcharts. You can just save it as a PDF and send it out to people. Um, but again, you have to pay for that, and so I absolutely don't expect that for this course. But if you're going to be doing this type of work, it might be something that it's worth asking your IT department if they can give you that software. Sometimes they'll have it; they just don't put it on everybody's computer right away because it does cost a little bit of money. But if you need it, a lot of IT departments will give it to you. So Visio is great, Visio, and that's through Microsoft. Lucidchart, you can absolutely get your free version, but you can only have 3 active flowcharts at a time. So you can make one, save it as a PDF, and then delete it out of Lucidchart. I guess the other way would be to create different accounts with different emails if you really wanted to go down that line. But it's not a lot per month either. I want to say it's like $5 a month, 8 maybe. So if you need it for a short period of time, it's not a terrible investment. I think that's about it that I wanted to show you right now on this graph making. And if you have any other questions, let me know. If there's any other types of graphs you'd like to see me sample, just send a message and I'm happy to record it. I hope you found this helpful. I'm attaching this file so that you have it and you can take a look at it. You can look at, look at some of these formulas that I put in. And any questions, please, as always, let me know. Thank you so much.